afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Stacy Weld-Blundell. I'm the Senior Advisor to the Resident Coordinator of the Head of the UN here in Pakistan. Tell me if you can all hear me well enough. Good. I suspect there'll be some more people dropping in as we go, but why don't we kick things off now in the interest of time? I know it's been a long day for everyone. Just to say, firstly, it's fantastic to be here in Karachi, and it's a great pleasure for me to be moderating this panel of very talented and esteemed speakers today. I will introduce the panel very shortly, but I wanted, if I may, just to frame the discussion briefly. What is this panel about? Well, the concept note of the session tells us the session will explore disaster risk reduction as a cross-cutting system that connects humanitarian response, climate action, and development planning. So, what does that mean in practice? Well, my background is not as a disaster risk reduction specialist, but I have worked in the multilateral space in the UN for some 20 years now. I've seen UN development programs and UN humanitarian programs succeed, and I've seen them fail. And when they fail, more often than not, in my experience, it's because we're not speaking the same language. And I don't mean that literally, I mean that in the sense that we work in our silos as humanitarian actors over here, as development actors over here, as climate policy actors over here. If development programs were always effective, there would be very little humanitarian need. If humanitarian action is designed to provide immediate short-term relief, then why is it that so many are remaining in cycles of poverty or humanitarian need? And if technical solutions are on paper sufficient, then why is it that so often they fail in practice? So I think the question here really today is, can the concept of disaster risk reduction be a useful common language? Can it be a useful framework so that diverse skill sets, so that diverse actors can come together behind sort of more sustainable solutions? In the context of shelter and settlement, which is obviously the overall rubric of our presence here for the next couple of days, that's about people being able to build back with dignity. It's about people being able to build back with the confidence that they won't again be displaced. These are obviously complicated policy questions, and so without further ado, let me just introduce our distinguished panel today. Immediately to my left, Madam Pradasanie Kumari joins us from Nepal. Pradasanie is an Undersecretary in the Ministry of Home Affairs in Nepal. That's the responsible entity for disaster risk management in Nepal. As chairperson of the District Disaster Management Committee, Pradasanie played a crucial role in developing disaster preparedness action plans and in coordinating the response to the devastating landslides that many of you will remember in Nepal. We're looking very much forward to your insights from 20 years of experience with government. On the far side there, you see Mr. Niaz. Niaz is a Pakistan-based consultant and CEO. He has over 25 years of experience working in DRR, climate adaptation, development planning, and humanitarian action. He's worked internationally on risk-informed programming and evaluations in Ethiopia, Indonesia, Myanmar, Malawi, Tajikistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Zimbabwe. He's worked as an advisor to the UN, the World Bank, the ATP, the FCDO, the EU, and many international organizations. Raju Jati, over there, Raju Jati. Raju joins us from Habitat for Humanity Nepal. Raju has extensive experience at the intersection of climate action, DDR, and humanitarian responses. Their programs on sustainable and resilient housing solutions, focused especially on integrating community-level needs into policy solutions. And then finally, last but not least, Jitendra Bothara, It's come all the way from New York, so I appreciate that it's 4:30, almost 5 o'clock in the day here. But if he is alive and well and awake and kicking, then all of you have no excuse not to be as well. Jitendra comes with 30 years of experience in seismic, as a seismic engineer, working on disaster risk mitigation. He's worked on pre- and post-earthquake assessments, recovery and reconstruction efforts in numerous countries, including in Pakistan and elsewhere in the region. He again has worked as an advisor to the UN, the World Bank, and other international and national organizations. So, welcome, Jitendra. Pradasanie, perhaps I can start with you. Nepal, as we know, has faced a number of crises over the years, climate shocks resulting in flooding, resulting in earthquakes, with devastating consequences for the community. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the experience of the government of Nepal in managing those challenges, and what lessons really do you take from your experience for policymakers and for practitioners? Over to you.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. As Stacy has already mentioned, that Nepal is definitely among one of the most hazardous prone countries facing escalating climate development and humanitarian pressure. So, last time in 2025, we had extreme erratic rainfall, which destroyed the Raswa district. So the capital of Raswa was completely, next day it was completely turned over with muds. So that destroyed almost all the infrastructures, and also the export. We imported goods from China, so all the lines at roadways were cut down. So that's how we have been facing the problem of erratic rainfall as well. And regarding regional studies as well, shows that millions of people in South Asia, including Nepal, have been affected. And this is why the DRR is definitely demonstrate the core logic of humanitarian nexus climate hazards, which disrupts development and in turn amplify long-term vulnerability. Right now, the government has been emphasizing on the federal structures, which emphasizes the three layers of government, including federal, provincial, and local level. So all three levels coordinate during the disaster, and the local level, especially the ward communities, which involves the community level, they prepare the plan and they do all the detailed damage assessment, which helps to solve the problem as well. Similarly, the government also has been using risk-informed and resilient development investment, including ZC policy, so that no one is left behind during the disaster. And also speaking about the real-time data, early warning system, and anticipatory action to guide both emergency response and long-term planning. Besides this, we also have challenges that government is facing is increase the common understanding on disaster risk reduction among different government institutions. So that's one of the main challenges, as well as mainstreaming DRR in all developmental process. So how we can mainstream DRR in all the development process, resilient infrastructure and social protection system, addressing vulnerability, and also ensuring build back better approach. So next slide, please. So you can see some of these policy supporting documents like local disaster and climate resilient framework, which collaborates with NAP and climate policy as well, and was last time, for the first time in NDRRMA, a command post was established, which was chaired by a CEO, which helped to reduce the loss of life and also to reduce the infrastructure destruction as well. Compared to the previous earlier year, the command post had acknowledged the change in the temperature, as well as it had banned over the transportation in the risky areas. And one more thing I would like to add is the social security allowance which the government has been providing to Nepalese citizens also plays an important role in addressing such situation. Thank you.
Pradasanie, thank you so much for that. I heard quite a bit about the importance of multi-level coordination, so that connection between national policy setting and district or subnational policy setting. Early warning initiatives, I think this is something that a lot of countries are playing with, but with climate it's famously sort of unpredictable, and so we'd be interested to hear more about the challenges on that front from others. Mainstreaming across different ministries. Another thing that is famously challenging, climate policy and wider sort of disaster response is something that needs to involve the education sector, the health sector, infrastructure, and so on. So, very difficult if you don't have the right coordination structures, back to those coordination structures in place. Moving on, Niaz, I wonder if I could put to you a bit of a question, because we've heard a lot about, over the course of the day, the importance of solutions that are sustainable. And there was an interesting presentation, of course, this morning from the host government in Sindh about their initiative on the housing project. What is it that we are? What is it that we're getting right, and what is it that we're getting wrong?
Thank you very much, first of all, giving me this opportunity. Rightly, I will say that this is not a question of the right and wrong, it's a question of perception. Perception is basically based on generally on our experiences, knowledge, and what we have witnessed over the period of the time. Let me start with Pakistani because I'm based from Pakistan. So I still recall in my fresh memory is 2005 earthquake in Pakistan. And that was the first time that people at a massive scale learned about disaster. Before that, I was used to work with a couple of organizations who were working on the disaster. But that was much more about riverine kind of a disaster. So the people were aware that these are the routes where the river will come, flood will come, so people. But 2005, earthquake shocked the basis of the country. And then in 2007, we first again signed the humanitarian crisis in the country, which was humanitarian. And then unfortunately, 2010, floods, 2011, 12, rainfall. So what perception over the period of the time, which was started that the people were unable to understand over the period of the time was a shift in disaster, understanding that moved from simple riverine toward the climate issues. But we were not ready for that one. So we were still thinking in the way that this is just like the way we were used to handle in the history. Because in case of the floods, we generally manage those kind of the camps. We generally after that we give some kind of a relief, and then we leave the people, they will construct the houses. But these 2005, 10 and 12 incidences in Pakistan started a national kind of thinking, created national institutions, training, and then disaster risk reduction become a norm of the much of the national program and policy. But still, if we see that after 20 years, we still not have been able to get what we envisaged in 2010. And the reason was that, unfortunately, very quickly, in 3-4 years' time, we changed the jargons. We started with disasters and no climate resilient. I myself work a lot in climate, I'm sorry to say, but sitting here, because today I'm wearing the cap of the DRR. So it's not easy for the people to make a shift in the mindset in a way, because any behavioral change requires a lot of time. So my first thinking is that there's nothing wrong with flight. It's a much more issue of the perception at the national level. It's much more issue of understanding that how we define the DRR. And that is so even true if we go beyond Pakistan. I have visited some of the African cases where the people have a similar kind of the challenges, where because the people are trying to reduce the climate, but the humanitarian crisis is much more bigger with the difference of opinion of the social norms. And I will give more examples related to the wash. The reason is that that's very close to my heart. For example, in many places in Africa, particularly we work, I have seen that there is a kind of the water rights issue between the people and the source of the water becomes old. So we have seen that over the period of the time, this is a dialogue. So coming back to that one, when we see Myanmar, there is an issue very different. The people have access to the water, but the UN agencies are not allowed to work with the government. So you cannot go with the development. So similarly, if we go to the Ethiopia, we can work with the government, but then there is an issue that host communities and the refugees, and the funding is more available for the refugees, that is not sustainable. And when you work with the host communities, then the same refugees will leave that. What will happen? That will go back to the communities. So those are some of those challenges which DRR, the broader policy level. So coming back to the DRR, I think 2-3 things are very important. First, we need to revisit the DRR. It's becoming much more climatic, repeated episodes. So we need to ensure that DRR becomes structurally integral part of our planning rather than thinking as one of the event. We need to rethink in the planning issue. Second issue is that we need to monitor it, because I will not go execution. Execution, we have seen that, but when we see the monitoring and reporting, that helps you to learn about it. So if we have a better learning, then we will improve our implementation. Rather than coming second part after planning implementation, I will say the first learning is more important because we are not learning, we are implementing it. And the last but not least is that, even despite that we have the national forum, but my last request would be that I have not seen that kind of the communication is going to the people at the right time. For example, we are not using the digital forum in that effective way, we are using the voice messages, but the way we can use this social media network in terms of raising the jargon and integrating in the mindset of the people, that is very important for the people. I think these are the 3 things where we change the perception, right will become, wrong will become the right, and there will be no issue for the right or wrong kind. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Niaz, very interesting. Three takeaways there. Ensuring DRR is part of wider policy planning processes from the very start. The importance of monitoring. I mean, this mantra for years, I remember former DFID and various others talking about if you don't monitor it, then you're not doing it. And that seemingly applies here. And then that third point on communication, very interesting to think about, and I think leads us very well perhaps into Raju with the community level perspective. I mean, it seems that when we fail, quite often it's because we're not internalizing those perspectives from or integrating sort of community perspectives. So be keen to hear your thoughts about how this can be done better and what we can learn.
Thank you, Stacy, and good afternoon all. Fortunately, I and Pradasanie are from Nepal, and we have talked about federal level policies, how the government is working on the disaster level. I will be more focused on the grassroots level of the intervention experiences. Like I would like to share, start my talk with a story of a community who are living in the floodplain. In Nepal, certain places of Nepal, there is a community who are living in the floodplain. They are living in the floodplain. That is because they do not have alternative choices. They are poor, they do not have any other lands in the safer areas. And you know that in Nepal we receive more than 80% of the rainfall occurs in 4 months, as in the South Asia, like the monsoon. Yeah? And at that time, most of the disasters occur, and these communities are always suffer with that disasters that are mostly because of the flood. That flood sometimes taken their life of the beloved family members and community members. And most of that occurs sometimes, but most of the times they lost their houses. They have to rebuild flood, and that expenses are a big chunk of their income because they do not have any kind of good job because they are working on the labor and unofficial kind of low-paying jobs. So this is this is a very stressful life for them each year, and though they are facing it each year, and that's a periodic one, but though it is in the priority, but they never became the top priority because they always struggle for the food, for their basic needs. Yeah? So, like this continues from since many years, and at a time when they realize that we have to work on this disasters like that, we have to prevent from the flood. So, the community members gathered and they discussed more structural way that how we can work to prevent from the disaster, so how we can improve our living standards. So they gathered and they they prepared a community level group that we call Community Disasters Management Committee, CDMC, and that CDMC became the leader for the disasters related issues working in the community. And later, the CDMC started a regular meeting and discussed on the disasters. And they have identified some of the interventions that can prevent them from the flood. And they have well documented as they are in the committee and they have the written documents of these interventions. And also they have started many other interventions such as they started establishment of community level emergency fund. They collect something like $50 per month per member of the CDMCs. The amount seems very less, but that amount is very much valid for them because for any kind of emergency situation, they do not have even the 100 rupees or $1 for the expenses. So this is valid for them. And also they link with the other agencies and they build their skills and capacity so that they can link with the government and they can put their agenda to the government plan and government's planning processes, and they continuously lobby and advocate for it. And one of the important things that they have done is that every year when they are rebuilding and the maintenance of the houses, they started to build integrate the flood resilient component in that process, that reconstruction and maintenance of their houses, in support with the local government and the different agencies that using the local technologies that is more affordable and that can be adopted by them very much easily. And that is a part of the community. But there is another part at the local government, that municipality level. And municipality, what happened that in Nepal, that we have the long gap in the local level. There were no election for 20 years, and later then when the new local government are elected, then they do not have much policies related to disasters. And in that case, what happened that when there is no disaster related policies and guidelines, they can, even though they have allocated budget for the disaster, they cannot spend because that will be questioned by the annual auditing process, and because of that risk, that budget remain unspent, and communities get always in vulnerable condition without any kind of budget for this. Then with the lobby and advocacy of the CDMC, that local government realized that we have to prepare the municipality level policies for the disasters. So we call it Disasters Management Act and other guidelines related for the disasters, budgeting to the disasters, and that integrate to their annual planning process. Also that the local government has formed the local disasters management committee in the inclusive way. They have included the person with disabilities, women and other deprived group of the communities. One of the members in that LBMC shared with me that one time that we always consider that person with disabilities are always the support seeker. They always need their support, but when they are included in our LBMC, our committee, then they share their ideas and that help us to make a clear program for the person with disabilities and other different group of the community. So that kind of changes in the perception will occur there. And also in the annual budgeting process, they have prioritized the climate change and DRR, and most importantly, as the communities require more resilient housing, that the local government in that flood, that was the highest flood in the 50 years. And at the time, what happened that the government has forecasted the flood may occur in that particular area. And when CTMC members received that information, they already engaged for the evacuation of the vulnerable communities like persons with disabilities, women and elderly people. They have timely evacuated all, even it was the midnight, they have evacuated all in the several places. And second thing is that the houses which considered the resilient component while they have maintenance and while they have reconstructed, that were not damaged. And that another important thing is that with that flood, no any human casualties were occurred, though it was the biggest flood in the 50 years. So that was how the community get benefited when they are empowered and they are supported by the policies and local government. So when I'm talking, saying all these things, but there are many other communities where the disasters impacted lots, and also they have their disasters damaged more than I think 5,000 houses. Those houses were like poor standard houses, and also they are built in the unsafe areas, and also they are built in the very poor, without considering the disaster. So these are with this story, I would like to contribute few things that I think we have to do is that the empowerment of the community is very much important. If the communities are empowered, they can do lots of things without money. Always, they do not need money always. So community empowerment is one of the important points. And secondly, the policies are very much required to plan and implement the climate change and DRR projects, and also that investment in the resilient infrastructure, that is essential, and also the communication, as our in the previous session they mentioned that the early warning system and kind of anticipatory actions are required, and that is also important in the community that if they give the timely information, that mechanism of the information dissemination should be strengthened, and this should be the proper channel for it. And finally, the disaster risk management is everyone's responsibility. So with this learning, I would like to conclude my
Thank you, Raju. Very interesting. I will come to you, Jitendra, but I actually just have a bit of a follow-up question, and it may well be more for Pradasanie than you, Raju. I take your point that community empowerment is in and of itself important and is not something that necessarily requires financial allocation. But at the same time, it often will, and one of the disconnects that I've seen in various places, and perhaps to some extent even in Pakistan, is that you have a disaster management agency or response agency which perhaps might not have the same link directly to a planning department or a planning ministry, which itself might not necessarily have the same link to a budgetary process and so on. So I'm curious to know how the committees that you spoke of, the CTMC or the municipal level, or whatever the feedback that's coming from those committees, can then feed into those budgetary and planning processes back at municipal or central government. I don't know if you have a word on that, Jitendra, just in 1 minute before, Pradasanie, in 1 minute before I come to Jitendra, thanks.
Thank you, Stacy, for your question. Actually, as you know, that DRR is the governing body which implements the policy provided by the Ministry of Home Affairs. And regarding your question, how is the community feedback included in the ministerial level? Right? So, in that case, these communities are regularly they participate in the ward level, which is the smallest unit of municipal and rural communities. So from there, they give the feedback, and also the DRR has a continuous meeting with development partners as well as clusters meeting, which helps to coordinate their issues and involve them in the planning. So you have a top model in which National Planning Commission is also involved, as well as bottom-up approach from the ward level community as well. So this helps in including the voices and their also planning from the budgetary section. Thank you.
Thanks, very interesting. Okay, Jitendra, I think we can come to you now. I mentioned in my brief introduction your background as a seismic engineer. Now, of course, the technical bit of response and resilience is very important, but who else do you need to bring with you on that journey?
Thank you. Thank you, Stacy. Kia ora, good afternoon, and walaikum salam. The most important role of or objective of disaster risk reduction, but I would rather say the only objective of disaster risk reduction is to reduce human suffering, casualty, and property loss. But review of data of last 2.5 decades indicates worldwide, and particularly in developing countries in Asia Pacific nations, the death and destruction is unacceptably high. I'm talking about not few thousand people, I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of people. And I'm talking about millions and millions of houses. Despite all efforts made by disaster risk reduction efforts in the last 40 years. So what is the impending, the reduction in impact of disasters? That's the fundamental question we need to think. Despite all our investment, all our effort, why it is not there? Why death and destruction are unacceptably high? Is it lack of knowledge? That could be a question. But before I question, what causes the disaster we are talking about? It's all vulnerable buildings. Wherever you go, in Asia Pacific region, other than few developed countries, 90% of the buildings are developed informally, organically, and in this decentralized way. And these buildings are highly vulnerable and they kill the people. They destroy the property. So what can we do? We have building codes, we have design standards, we have guidelines. But despite having all that knowledge, why we are not able to improve our building stock? That's the question we need to think. And the message is, until we improve our building stock, impact of disaster cannot be reduced because the disaster happens because of the buildings. That's the fundamental message. What is the problem? We have all the knowledge. It is not lack of my experience working in more than 2 other countries in Asia Pacific region and Central Middle East and other countries indicates there is enough knowledge. So may not be perfect, but there is enough knowledge to reduce impact of disaster. The problem is that message, the knowledge, the science is not trickling down to the people who need them. And as I mentioned earlier, our building stock is organic, it is decentralized, and it is informal, and which is formed by, shaped by the local craft people. So we are doing generating a lot of knowledge, but knowledge is not trickling down, so it is not implemented. So every time we are increasing the risk. So what the message is, a viability of knowledge doesn't mean reduction in disaster. That's the question we need to think of. Next, please. So what can we do? Our building stock or building procurement system is organic, decentralized. The formal building consent system will not work for this. It has not worked, it will not work, because it's a very resource-intensive system. So we need some simple system. So I thought of this, and then I started to think,
the disaster risk reduction is basically public good. And it should be framed in public health framework. So we can look at population, not individual building. As a seismic engineer, in New Zealand I design buildings. But there are such few people, but we are talking about here millions of people. So we need to think at population level, not individual level. We need to think of prevention rather than perfection. If 5 solutions solves our 60% of problem, let's solve that problem, move on, rather than finding perfect solution. And we need to deal at community level. So we provide resilience to community. I'm not talking about single building. I'm talking about community. So let me take some examples. 5 decades back, I'm taking an example of public health. 5 decades back, had the vaccinator not come to my home, convinced my parents to vaccinate me for smallpox, I'm not sure I would have been here today. I would have been dead by 5 years of age because of the smallpox, because of pandemic. And I think 1/3 of the audience here, sitting here, had you not been vaccinated, you would not have been here today. You may have, sorry to say, you may have been dead by 10 year age. And remaining 2/3, half of that would have been all pock marks on your face and disabled. It is not the disaster, the science solved, it is not only the science eradicated smallpox or polio. It is the vaccinator who came to my home and solved the problem because the message was very simple. So it is a whole institution, it is not only vaccinator, it is a whole institution. There is a monitoring, there is a funding, whole system. But what my message is, here is a health disaster. Here is a building disaster. And I see parallel in them, they are very similar. If building health disaster can be solved with a certain framework, why we can't adopt same framework and adopt it for building to resolve building disaster and reduce the impact on human life? And it can be done. It has successfully done after 2005 Kashmir earthquake because the message was delivered to the end user, the craftspeople. We empowered them and immediately building stock improved. It happened in Nepal because we started training and empowering people, the craftspeople, the small contractors, and immediately quality improved. And it happened, and I'm very lucky, I find myself very lucky. I contributed for defining or framing the reconstruction modality, the reconstruction framework after 2022 Sindh flood, the Pakistan flood, and you see the success of SPH. Though we didn't talk explicitly about public health model, but we implicitly talked it, and that has been implemented, and you see the success. So it can be done for buildings also, but we need to rethink our model. And until we do, I don't see we can go at community level and reduce disaster at a scale. So my take-home message is, it is not lack of knowledge or science, which is impending disaster risk reduction. It is the delivery of knowledge to the people who need, who shape our building system, who shape our housing sector. It's a matter of empowering those people to improve our building stock. So we need to invest in. Investing in knowledge is important to fill in the gap. But if the knowledge is not implemented, goes to the end user, it gives an illusion of preparedness because we think we know everything. But knowing doesn't mean anything. That's what my experience is. What matters is we empower those people to improve the building stock. And I think that would be the way to go. Else we will be creating more and more risk despite all our efforts. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jitendra. I mean, this public health analogy is a compelling one that reads across, I think, to a number of different sectors and issues. And it goes without saying, prevention is better than cure, and often that investment is much more at the sort of local day-to-day level than it is at the sort of macro policy level, but the two need to come together. Now, we have about 12 minutes left, I think, and I'm very keen to take some questions from the floor. I have a couple myself as well, so but I would rather take them from the floor. So please, sir, in the front row.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Arvind Sulaksono from Habitat for Humanity Indonesia. My question is for Mr. Jitendra. It's a very good analogy on the public health lens. Usually we are working on the after disaster, then will be reconstruction. It is from the knowledge, engineering knowledge lens, and translate in social language. My question is how then from the public health lens can maintain the need, the urge on the disaster risk reduction, because abiding the code, when we are working in a humanitarian setting, post-disaster, sometimes people forget in the development. Let's say if the building, the house construction, 70% of our house is not abiding the code. How to ensure after the disaster, the knowledge can be transferred to in the development setting. So I still need to know from your experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, can we perhaps take if there are any more questions in the room? I just thought maybe we'd take a quick round. Okay, I don't see any immediately, but let me just tack something onto the back of that, either for Jitendra or for others, which is, and I'm recalling a line that I think the ATB representative this morning said about the need to design for tomorrow's risks, not yesterday's crises. And I thought it was quite a striking line. And that means, given the sort of increased frequency, that we're not just rebuilding as was, right? We have to be doing, as you put it, Pradasanie, early warning, horizon scanning, looking at many different things. So I'm wondering how we build that sort of rolling therapy into your global health analogy. I think no other hands in the room at the moment. Okay, one more.
From APSSF. So my question is from Sir Jitendra. Sir, from purely engineering point of view, what retrofitting techniques do you think are easier to convey to the craftsmen, the masons in the ground? And number two, from design perspective, what important things do you think that those masons and those unskilled persons that are working without the supervision of any engineering firms or those kind of things, what techniques or simple rules you can identify that those can be transferred, those can be shared with them, that buildings can be sustainable, more resilient structures for the future?
Thank you very much. I don't see any other hands immediately, so why don't we turn back to the panel? Thank you.
So, thank you for very interesting questions. I come to you first. When I say empowering craftspeople, that's a vaccinator. But behind vaccinator, there's a whole structure, vertical structure, to send that vaccinator to my home. So similar structure in like public health structure, we need a vertical structure. So the message goes continuously to people. And I give one example. We need to wash hands before eating. And the wash gives this message every time. We all know we have to wash hands, but we don't. So that's why the message has to be given every time. Exactly the same thing happens in case of disasters. We have to keep hammering people. Because I think the nature, that's how I think, nature has tuned us some way to forget bad memory. So our role is to keep hammering and keep reminding them, don't make a mistake. There's no excuse. And that's what I believe. Coming back to how we can do it, of course we need a structure, we need funding, and it requires a policy environment. Because the public health program came with policy environment. There's a whole set of national police under all the countries. So we need similar policies. And I'm not talking about one-off training. I'm talking about trainings and the whole process institutionalized. One-off training doesn't solve problem. We need a whole institution, whole institutionalized system. And only then we can attack the problem. So we have to invest. We need policy to address this. Currently, as far as I know, in many countries I have worked, there is no policy on improving education. There is no policy on improving the informal building system. How we can improve it? So we need changes, real changes. Thank you. Coming back to your question, should I continue?
Please continue.
Okay. So you asked about the retrofitting, if I understand right. First thing we need to understand, and that's my experience for the last 3.5 decades. When we talk with these masons, carpenters, bar benders, we need to remove our engineering brain. Because we start from drawings, and we want them to learn drawings. And there's a many trainings I have seen miserably fail. The mason training miserably failed because the trainer wanted them to do drawings. It took me whole first year to learn how to make drawings, how to read drawings in my engineering. And we want these masons, many of them are illiterate or nominally illiterate, and we want them to read drawings and retain in English. Oh, whatever. We are creating mess. So we need to simplify our message. And we need to talk to them with respect in their language. I'm not talking about Hindi or Nepali or Urdu. I'm talking about their language, their terminology. And only then we can transfer message. And I share with you my own experience. We did one retrofitting of building in 98. It's a mud mortar building, first time we did. And I was working on that. I designed, of course there was a lot of criticism, but we thought it will work. And some people are supporting it. And when I started working with craftsmen, there was always question was, why should I do it? So I was trying to explain that. In the process, I learned more than I taught them. I learned how to bend bars. I learned how to lay bricks. I learned carpentry with them. And that gave trust. Because then they started to trust me. Then I could talk to them. And that's the most important thing from implementation point of view. If you want to, otherwise, why should they trust you? Why should they trust me? So we need to create that trust with respect. They are not our order givers. They are professionals. And we need to respect them, acknowledge them. Maybe other question was technical, retrofitting, we can talk later. Thank you.
All right. Maybe I could pass the floor to Niaz over there. I think you have something to comment, but 2 minutes because I think we're approaching time. Thank you.
I think what my colleagues were mentioning, that's very important. But unfortunately, one more important factor is that, and that is from the policy side. The cost involved when we bring the DRR and climate change lens, and that's what we are facing not in Delhi and Pakistan and other places. When we talk in papers, everyone talks about, but when we go for the allocation of the funds in the project proposals that increase the cost. When this cost comes increase, then it stops, and then they try to go back. So the question also at the same time is that it's not only about creating knowledge among those communities. It's much more important also to creating knowledge in the policymaker that there is some additional cost if you are taking DRR and climate change as an important part. And secondly, I would like to share a live example in a way that I have done the climate change index across the country. And I have compared that, what was the reason that Karachi, I'm giving an example, Islamabad are less vulnerable compared to the other cities of some of the interior, North Sindh, some of the southern Pakistan. The difference is not that the exposure is not, the similar kind of the incidence of the disasters in terms of the rainfall, heat wave, that exists in all cities. The difference is in terms of the adaptive capacity and coping capacity, because the people have the knowledge and skills. So they claim those knowledge and skills much more And for example, in case of the Karachi, you cannot close Karachi for a couple of days. So you immediately bring back the things back to the life, and you have the system in place there. But unfortunately, my cultural norms in the rural area is that I used to depend upon agriculture, so I wait for 3 months, someone will come, someone will help me. So that norm doesn't exist in urban area, because you know that if you will not go to the job, no one is coming to your help. So the very next day, in spite of all those challenges, you have to go back. That kind of thinking in social behavior change stories is not existing. Our social behavior change stories are existing to the practice, but we need to give some lives to it. So my request would be that, in addition to that, what my colleagues are mentioning from the community side, my request would be this: very important to educate the policy maker. Additional resources are required, but at the same time, the thinking should not be divided between urban and rural areas. And that's what we see. I'm sorry, but that's the point that's very important from the, if we want to bring climate disaster and over to you.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Niaz. Really interesting. Now, I think advise that we may have to wrap up now, unless it's a very, very quick question. We have time.
To take from the southern.
I think perhaps we can take one question. Very, very good. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My question is from my friend Niaz.
Oh my God, I did not ask him.
I'm listening a couple of debates, and I think we talk more about the climate resilient housing for the communities, but how this evolving shape is shaping also the changing the infrastructure, the way we plan, the government plans. We know that during any flood, we know that people lose their houses, but they also lose the roads, the infrastructure that is built by government, and also the hospitals or the school which serve as the shelter during emergencies. But we see they are the same conventional model maybe 3 decades before. So why, how government should also learn to integrate these all learning into their own planning, implementation for the public services? Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Niaz. I'm going to give you 1 minute on this.
Less than 1 minute. My answer is very simple here. And I think the way this morning the Chief Minister was telling that, the chairman of, so same way is very important that if we can elect a critical wisdom for that area. That if you are predicting the government of the hospital, but you are not giving external perspective, the hospital will not be. So my simple answer would be that one. It cannot be done that until that time you cannot educate the political leadership. And that is what I was talking earlier. Additional resources. Those additional resources are required at household level. Those are required for the DRR infrastructure, which is external infrastructure. Thank you.
And also about squaring that circle again between the sort of local level and forming national policy. I will wrap up very, very quickly in summary, thanking everybody on the panel. We discussed a lot. Niaz, I think, a very compelling yes to the notion that DRR can be a bridge that sort of transforms the climate risk and humanitarian and development discourse. Pradasanie, strong emphasis on, again, coordination, having the right policy frameworks. I think we had that from others as well. Raju, you're right, community is the first responder. The communities know their needs and they should be key to policy making. And then Jitendra, so much I can't summarize, but key, there's no lack of expertise, right, as you said, and the need is really to kind of promulgate that expertise to technicians and embed that much better in a sort of more coherent response. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining, and thank you again hugely to the panel. A round of applause for that. Thank you. Thank you very much.